The world is on a knife edge. There's over 100 armed conflicts currently taking place right across the globe. Some of these are new, others have been going on for decades. But each week we'll break down everything you need to know to understand the battles shaping the world today. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Maddie, Hale. This week we're going to stay topical and dive straight into the Israel-Hamas war. While tensions between the Jewish state and Palestine have run deep for decades, the conflict escalated on October 7 when the terrorist group Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, killing over 1,500 Israelis and kidnapping over 250. Today, Israel and Hamas are still locked in a deadly war, which now seems to have no end in sight as ceasefire discussions continue to fail and the IDF ignores calls to stop its offensive at the Rafah crossing in Gaza. Joining me now to discuss all the latest in this ongoing battle is Rear Admiral and former NATO commander Parry. Chris, thank you so much for your time today. Israel has gone through with its plan to move into the southern Gazan city of Rafah, now launching bombs in the area. Can you walk me through what's happened in its latest attack?
Well, what we've seen is preparations for the final assault on Rafah. I think we are entering the end game now. We've seen Israeli troops and formations recuperating. They've been replenishing, refueling, rearming. And also they've been taking advantage of the intelligence assets that are available to try and localize where the remaining Hamas fighters are and where their hostages might be. They've sealed off the Rafah crossing into Egypt, and that's a vital supply lifeline and an escape route, of course, for Hamas leadership. And so I expect that Israel will now push to finish the conflict in Gaza over the next couple of weeks.
In this latest attack, Chris, it's looking like currently there's around 35 Palestinians who have died and 130 already injured from Israel's airstrikes. In Israel's, mission to take hold of this area, is there a way around, not killing innocent Palestinian civilians?
I'm afraid to say that when you're involved in intensive urban operations like this, you either have to clear the population out of the way, which is what the Israelis have been trying to do, or you have to try and work around them in some way. What complicates the problem, of course, is that Hamas sees the population as part of the ground that they hide behind. And so at the same time as the Israelis are trying to minimize casualties, we know that Hamas are trying to maximize casualties amongst the population. And even if they don't, they claim that they are. So it confuses the picture. And I think all of us know that we're in the middle of a massive information and disinformation campaign as well. So it's vastly complicated. And all of us feel for the innocent victims of this conflict. But as a military man, I have to say, the sooner it's over, the less suffering there'll be.
It definitely does feel like a bit of a needle in the haystack for the Israeli military, finding these Hamas terrorists in Rafah. But the military, the IDF did tell Palestinians in Rafah to evacuate before they started their airstrikes, telling these people to move north. But there is around 1.3 million Palestinians living in this highly populated area. How I guess, successful was the IDF in moving these innocent people along? It's obviously hard to tell this many people to move out of their home or their makeshift home if they had moved in from different areas. But did a lot of Palestinians actually evacuate the area in time?
Well, they didn't have much time, that's for sure. But of course, I think the Israelis have been very careful on the ground. This time, they're not going around, obviously, dealing with areas at once, which they did in the north and centre. They're conducting targeted raids and strikes where they know they've got targets. Again, the real problem is that you can be a Hamas operator by night, but also turn into a civilian by day. And we've seen Israelis make mistakes already with regard to various civilians and also aid workers as well. That's inevitable, unfortunately, in this sort of very, very complex mosaic. But they're trying hard. What I've seen so far over the last few days are really specifically targeted raids, which I think must be linked to real-time intelligence to enable them to avoid casualties and obviously get the people they want.
Well, on that note and this intelligence, Chris, Israel has said that they need to launch this full-scale operation in Rafah in order to end the war, as you said, in order to find the remaining Hamas terrorists. But how confident do you think the IDF and the Israeli government must be in knowing where these leaders and these, believers of Hamas are located?
Well, I mean, they know where they are roughly. I mean, they're underground somewhere in the south of Gaza. They're just going to have to pick their way through all the tunnels and all the structures there to try and find them. The fact of life is these guys and the women as well can't stay concealed forever. They have to come up sometime for communications, for air and everything like that. Otherwise, they'll be in a permanent prison. But I've said to somebody the other day, it's like searching in southern Gaza 3 of our tube lines in London. That's about the scale of it. You're going to have to do those miles of tunnels. You're going to have to find out where they come up, and you're going to have to dominate the ground for as long as it takes to be able to do to clear the area.
Chris, you touched on this before, but obviously Israel and the IDF have come under intense scrutiny for the way in which they've handled, the retaliation and I guess need to find these Hamas terrorists, as we were speaking about. But how far do you think the IDF will take it in order to kill all or capture all Hamas leaders and members of the terrorist organisation, even if it means that thousands or tens of thousands of Palestinians could die?
Well, the Israelis are going to finish the job. In order to win, all Hamas has to do is not lose. So unless the Israelis finish the job, it'll be a strategic defeat for them, and they'll probably have to come back and do it again. So unless they finish the job now, it'll create real problems, not just for the Israeli military, which can't keep going forever at this pace, but also for the Israeli economy as well. So it's got to be finished this time. At the end of the day, Israel has to answer the question, how do you get justice for the victims of the 7th of October? How do we eradicate a threat which says it wants to wipe out all the Jewish people in Israel? And how do we get lasting peace and security in the region? At the moment, the only people who have a plan for that are the Israelis. There is no other coherent plan that will deliver those 3 objectives. So until that happens, the Israelis have to be able to get on with it and finish this as soon as possible.
Chris, the United States, Israel's largest donor, has heavily protested against Israel's plan to invade Rafah, so much so that the Biden administration even paused a shipment of weapons to the Jewish state, further proof that it does not support Israel's full-scale attack that it's launched. From an outsider's perspective, how tense do you think these relations currently are? Do you think the US would threaten to stop all funding?
No, I mean, what we're seeing here is the balance of internal and external audiences. We're in a major election year in the United States. Part of Biden's support base is falling away as a result of this, just as it is within the Labour Party in the UK. And various messages have to be sent out there to placate or indeed keep calm these various constituencies. Now, Netanyahu's in the same position in Israel, but from what I see across the board, everybody at senior level, in all levels of politics in Israel, want to finish the job. So there's no problem for Netanyahu. He'll be allowed to finish this as long as it's successful and the Israelis aren't taking too many casualties. I think the Biden administration will continue to make the right noises, but they'll not want Israel to fail.
Let's get into the recent rejected ceasefire proposal. This week, Hamas accepted a deal proposed by Qatar and Egypt, but Israel rejected it, saying that the deal was not in the country's best interest. What exactly did this deal include for someone who was, not up with the news and not consuming so much of what's actually been proposed here by these 2 countries?
Well, that's part of the problem. None of us do know what was in the deal. So it seems like a cooked up deal between Egypt, Qatar, and Hamas, and nobody really bothered running it past the Israelis. It was then announced ahead of the Israelis really considering it. And to my mind, it was simply a tactical move by Hamas to stall the invasion of Rafah. I don't think there was any substance to it. I don't think Hamas had any sincerity in thinking they were going to implement it, to tell you the truth. And if you looked at what did come out, which was sort of a drip feed of hostages over a period of 6 weeks, There was no proof that the hostages are still alive. And I'm afraid to say Hamas were trying to deceive everybody, which is what they do all the time.
Well, there was, speculation from the former Hamas leader, who's now an Israeli spy. His name, escapes me, but he did say that not for Israel not to listen to this, and it would be a trap. But Chris, what do you think the chances are that Hamas would have actually released these remaining hostages, but also resigned from power?
Well, from what I've seen, the Hamas leadership aren't the type to die in the last ditch. So I should think they're looking to escape at some time and leave the rest of Gaza to its fate. I suspect that's what they're probably thinking about right now, rather than trying to resist the Israeli Defense Forces. I personally am very worried about the hostages. I think they'll either have died of neglect, they'll either died of violence perpetrated against them, because we saw what happened on 7th of October, or they've been accidentally killed in the conflict. To my mind, it would have been a brilliant tactical move for Hamas to say, you know what, we're going to release all the hostages now. And it would have taken the air completely out of the Israeli campaign before they attack Rafah. But it's too late for that now. And I do wonder whether they have anything to trade.
Chris, just finally, according to an Israeli official, Israel sees no sign of breakthrough in these ceasefire talks that have been spoken about as of late. What do you think it would take for both Israel and Hamas to come to an agreement to end this war?
There's no chance of that. Israel is now committed to finishing this campaign and eradicating Hamas. And what we have to think about then is what happens afterwards. How do we put Gaza back together again? How do we create the conditions for peaceful coexistence? How does Israel deal with the other threats that are on its border right now? We've seen what's come from Iran. We know Hezbollah in the north is a massive threat to Israel that can't stay there forever. And as we know, the whole north of Israel has been evacuated. Up to 80,000 people. They've got to go back and live sometime. And I think as far as the peace and security of the region are concerned, somebody has to come up with an idea for making Israel feel safe in the middle of all these people that want to do Israel harm. Until you can come up with that sort of plan, Israel will be an armed camp for the foreseeable future.
But in your mind and opinion of what's going on, this last offensive in Rafah will be the last battle between the two?
Yep. If I were an Israeli commander, if I were an Israeli politician right now, I'd know that if I lost momentum, I'd lose that window of legitimacy that I still have left. And I also, if I finish it now, can minimize the number of casualties, both on my own side and amongst the innocent civilians who I'm afraid are caught up in this.
Chris Parry, thank you so much for your time today.